Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well today. How about you?
I'm doing great on this beautiful moon day, and I'd like to thank you listeners for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we'll be talking about apotheosis and the process of a human becoming an adult. When America was founded, we were one nation under God, the land of the free and home of the brave. Today, money has become our God, and we are the land of the addicted and the home of the terrorized. Listen as we talk about where we went wrong and how to get back on track. We will discuss the responsibility of each individual to become an adult. Swami will show by starting locally, we can expand into global change. Start by using these standards to help you choose candidates to become our next leaders. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and become a human in the adult state. So, Swami, the primaries are starting this week, and when I think about leadership or leaders, you look up in a dictionary, it says leader is a person who rules, guides, or inspires others. And I like that word inspire because when I look for a leader, whether it's a leader or a teacher in a yoga class or work environment, I'm looking for somebody that does have that ability to make everybody else around them better at what they do or what they are. So it reminds me of the JFK speech where he says, it is not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That, to me, was really inspiring, trying to get everyday person involved in what's going on in their world and in their country. So how do you think how should we look at what's going on around us right now regarding this political environment in the yoga style, Kriya Yoga style?
Well, what surrounds us is within us. Mm-hmm. So the first order of business you want to do is try and get a sense of the level of consciousness and the degree of awareness of the collective consensus. And even say, for example, one of the things I really like to do is I like to use television to give me some insight into it. And I think it was last night we were watching the NHL All-Star game, and I thought it was really great that Heineken had a commercial on that they were looking for, a hero. And you've got all of these beautiful women, and they're all looking for this savior or whatever it is that they're looking for. But this person who is somehow larger than life, and lo and behold, it's someone who drinks beer. And so kind of like gives you an understanding of the message that's collectively out there, how we glamorize, we glorify vice. And the thing that's really not being promoted or even considered is this whole thing of virtue. And so when you peel it back and you start to look at why aren't we? Well, part of it is like attracts like. And what we don't have is we no longer have the lifestyle that will enable us to grow psychologically and spiritually. So we're not becoming humans in the adult state. We're a population of humans in the larvae state. And so as a result, our mentality, the collective consensus, is resonating to this much more materialistic mentality kind of a thing, that we're not resonating to the sublime. We're drawn toward the gross. And again, without leadership, without an understanding of, well, how do I become a human in the adult state? Because most of us don't even know that that's available to us. And looking around and seeing, well, what would be the big indicator that we were a population of humans in the adult state? And for me, the biggest thing would be this whole concept of virtue.
Well, that's a tough thing, I think, for us as voters and yogis to try to discern of all the candidates that are out there. How do we know if they're virtuous or not? I mean, because we only know what we're shown, from the TV and things like that. So then how do we go about trying to decide who it is that we want to represent our country?
Yeah, and that's why I think in kind of like the beginning of the show, we talked about the whole thing of we really have to start locally. You can't expect this change to come from the political environment. You can't expect the government to pass this down to us. It's just kind of like what we had said. The origins of this country were we were one nation under God. We were the land of the free, the home of the brave. It's not until we really start to figure out what God is or was or should be, and what does it look like when I am joined with this, instead of cosmic puppeteer, but this source of sustenance, this dimension of reality that produces an expanded sense of self. The whole thing of growing psychologically and spiritually, opening your identity beyond the limits of seeing yourself as separate. And then, of course, adopting the lifestyle that would facilitate this process. Because the way it is right now, we're so embroiled in the physical world, and we're so self-absorbed, and we're preoccupied with the pain, pleasure, control dramas of our own physical bodies, that we can't really get that broader sense of awareness. And again, our lifestyle doesn't enable us to grow because we're not attuning ourselves to a resource of energy that is sublime, that is invisible and intangible. So the physics of spirituality is like attracts like. But coming back to the whole thing of virtue and trying and pick somebody who is at least demonstrating some degree of virtue by nature, I think would be the best choice that you could make. And I think it's really important to understand the whole concept of virtue, because I think it was Alice Bailey in her book, The Labors of Hercules, where she really made a really big distinction between vice and virtue. And vice was to render ineffective. And then we look at all the things, what we do today is we try and glorify our vices. We try and romanticize them and somehow make them do what we think we want, which is this whole thing of strength. You know, the power that comes with this connection to the divine produces tolerance, compassion, charity. It produces a human in the adult state, an expanded sense of self. And those would be more appealing if we were I want to say, at a better level of consciousness or a better degree of awareness collectively.
It makes sense when you put it like that, how to look at somebody who has this virtue. And then you reminded me when you said earlier, what surrounds us is within us. So if we ourselves are on this path to becoming an adult, then we actually see those qualities in someone else. I think that's what you're trying to say. I think is that, if I'm on this road to apotheosis, then I'm going to be able to recognize those qualities in somebody else, and then, because like attracts like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's the whole thing, that the human in the adult state is virtuous by nature. It's not something that you're trying to do. It's the essence of your makeup. And a lot of it is it all comes down to this whole thing of selflessness. And when you're picking a leader, one of the qualities I think that's really valuable is that you judge a leader by their willingness to serve as opposed to dominate. And when somebody has this expanded sense of self, this whole concept of recognizing that what I'm putting out is what I'm getting back, and I like myself, that your conduct is really in tandem with this betterment of a greater whole as opposed to personal interest.
Isn't there a saying about integrity, something to the effect of integrity is something that you do or something that you are when nobody else is watching? So it's kind of like you said, it's something that is a part of you, not something that you try to become. And I think that is something we should look for in our leaders, whether it's in our political environment or even in our work environments. I think leadership or leaders are people who really try to bring out the best in their team. As a matter of fact, I think they were saying that about one of the players in the All-Star game last night. They were talking about Yager, and a lot of the hockey players were saying that about him, that there's something about him that brings out the best in all the players from whatever team that he's on. And that kind of reminded me about our show today, and that's kind of like what we want our leaders to be, to bring out the best in everybody. So everybody has their jobs to do, and to inspire them to be the best that they can be at them.
Yeah, and again, using what I call comprehensive clues to measure someone's conduct. One of the things is, in Kriya Yoga, we use this concept of purity. And purity isn't necessarily just adherence to values that are in accordance with divine law, but purity is your ability to think, feel, say, and do one and the same thing. And that's one of the things that you really kind of notice as far as the whole political environment is that people say one thing, but they do something completely different, and chances are that they feel something alien to the two above. So they're scattered. And so again, looking for somebody who can do what it is that they say they're going to do would be a really good indicator of a trustworthy leader. Because who would want to make themselves vulnerable in an unsafe environment? You know, especially being this whole concept of yoga and spirituality doesn't mean that you're a doormat. It begins with non-injury. And so protecting yourself is equally as important as being considerate of those around you. And when somebody says one thing and does something completely different, then of course they haven't earned your trust. And if somebody isn't trustworthy, then how can you actually vote for that person, I guess, would be my question on that.
All right, well, we'll get back to that in a few moments. But right now, listeners, we're going to hold that thought and pause to hear a word from our sponsors. So we will be back in a few moments.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Starting with the separation from mother, including the labors and tasks of the hero and the return as a whole person. Practice makes perfect only when practice is whole. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. Samadhi, or total consciousness, is experienced by knowing and doing with devotion. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, right before the break, you were talking about that we should look for leaders that have a sense of purity. They should think, feel, say, and do should be all in the same thing. And what they say they're going to do, they should do it. But we all know in this political environment, one of the things that the presidents always seem to be ridiculed about is the fact they make these promises and they can't keep them. But we have this whole big political machine that can stop them from doing what it is that they want to do. So we could have a perfectly great candidate, but once they get into office, it's a totally different story. And isn't that something that we can even apply to our everyday worlds that we have?
Yeah, that's why I think it's so important that we start locally. And each one of us starts to take responsibility for our own development and growth. And each one of us kind of makes the break. We get off of the grid because the political system is corrupt. And to be able to correct that, we really have to correct the population, the people. We have to give the power back to the people. And that's why I think it's so important that each and every one of us starts to make this connection and starts to become an individual and starts to do their own thinking as opposed to just adopting some sort of opinion. But to actually, what we talked about last week, use your mental functions, perception, reason, memory, intuition, and start tailoring your responses to things based on facts instead of just jargon. And picking a leader based on maybe more their level of consciousness than how charismatic they are. But the whole thing of starting out with some sort of sense of golden rule for oneself, whether it be the 10 Commandments or the yamas or some sort of golden rule where you start to put your life in accordance with divine law, because it's kind of like the physics of spirituality. It's like attracts like. It's in order to siphon water out of a jar, you have to get water in the hose. And so the whole thing of starting to be a little bit more, well, I think the word you used was administer more integrity in your daily routine. be able to think, feel, say, and do one and the same thing, and be able to make your choices based on laws that are in accordance with universal order. I think that's where we can start. And then, of course, recognizing how the relativity of everything, how our lifestyle today undermines our willpower. You know, the foods we eat, undermine our ability to make choices. And so being able to really start to see all of the changes that we'd have to put in place in order for us to become this human in the adult state. But then also recognizing the benefits, because then you're out of the fear. You have the benefit of what we call a resource-based economy. And it will make the political climate or environment smaller because there are higher laws than the United States government.
That's very true. I was looking at our notes for the show today, and I wanted to talk about the salutation to the sun that we do in our asana class, and you have assigned to each posture an attribute. Now, we may have listeners out there who have no idea what it is that we're talking about. I was wondering if you could take a moment and talk to our listeners about the attributes of salutation to the sun and how we can apply that to, finding our next leaders, whether it's our political environment or work environment or whatever it is that we're looking for.
Yeah, I think the whole thing to salutation to the sun is also the importance of the combining it with salutation to the moon. That the whole thing of what those postures are intended to do. Because one of the things I've always really admired was the Dalai Lama would say that my religion is kindness. And of course, when I hear the word religion, the word means relink. So my religion is whatever it is that enables me to connect to this life force, to this tree of life, to this invisible, intangible source of sustenance. And salutation to the moon are 12 movements, 12 positions that invoke the life force into each individual system that makes up the physical body. And then, of course, salutation to the sun, like you said, becomes our opportunity to demonstrate and embody the qualities that this connection to the life force enable us to become. So, and what's interesting is that the sun in Aries is represented by bravery. And then, of course, you've got Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and you've got all of the characteristics and qualities that are associated with them. But it ends in Pisces, which is kindness. So here you have a system of movements that are specifically designed to attune you to this invisible, intangible resource. Very similar to when a bee comes back to a hive, it does this kind of dance. And what it's doing is it's telling all the other bees where it went to get the pollen. And so salutation to the moon is actually these movements that are telling the human mind-body complex where to go to find this tree of life, this invisible, intangible source of sustenance. So you're actually attuning yourself so that you can invoke the life force into your physical body. And then that connection to that resource changes who we are, and then it allows us to demonstrate all of the qualities that start with bravery and end with kindness. And, of course, the attributes that we use actually came from the Boy Scout law that we use, that a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, thrifty, brave, clean, reverent. And we just one time sat down and we first of all, we wanted to know how many of them were there, because there were 12. And rather than using things that were maybe more Tibetan or from a more yoga standpoint, we just kind of decided that we would use something that was a little more current.
Well, I think it really works, because when teaching a class, I think, people, they get it. It's something they're familiar with, and I think familiarity breeds, kind of this comfort, and I think it helps them learn and remember it. So I think that's a good thing. And Swami, I was wondering if I could just get off of topic for a moment to ask you a question from a previous show, and that is, there's a question about today is I think an astrological event today. This is the ending of, this is a third quarter phase of the moon from the eclipse from November 3rd of 2013. Would you mind speaking a moment about that to maybe clarify what that means for us all?
Yeah, that would be the the end of the cycle. 2 years, 2 months, and 28 days. And so the the third quarter phase of the moon that completes whatever began on November 3rd, 2013. And then, of course, you can go to the website, and we do have those dates posted, because it's really helpful. We not only post the phases of the moon that are associated with that, but we also post all of the transits of Mars and the Sun, the hard aspect transits, the conjunctions, the squares, and the oppositions to the eclipse point, which produce triggers. And then what I like to do is I like to put all the dates in, say, for example, Excel, and then just look for events or maybe an incident or something, a dream that I had, to try and give me some sort of insight into what does this eclipse represent for me? And a lot of times for those of us, what we're basically trying to figure out is, what is my collective purpose? And it can give you a lot of insight into what it is that you are intended to do with this lifetime. Well,
that could be a tall order for some people to do, but I think it's a great exercise for people to go back through and try to figure out what it is that they need to do. So I believe it's probably about that time to start closing down our program today. So listeners, I'd like to invite you to visit the website. You can follow Swami on Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook. And the website is www.ipdtransform.com. Once there, you can also post comments about this show or any other ideas that you may have for other shows you would like us to do as well. But keep those comments, questions, and curiosities coming, because Swami does enjoy hearing from you. And be sure to tune in next week. I believe we're going to be talking about Mardi Gras. And you can also email me at lisa@ipdtransform.com with any questions you would like Swami to answer about the upcoming show or even previous shows as well. So, Swami, any final thoughts before we close down our program today?
Well, I would like to suggest that people do choose wisely with regard to their leaders, but at the same time, I wouldn't put too much stock into big changes coming from the political environment, and just maybe start with their own personal growth, taking some classes and joining us. And with that, I wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.